You're on
Hey
mute, Matt.
everyone, how's it going? I'm on mute.
Good.
It's always a good start. Derek just complimented our new introduction.
It's
That was
good.
a whole 30 minutes in Ace Sprite mocked
I
up.
I,
So
I want to change the sound out for the Duke Nukem theme song.
that could be good, but I was thinking curtain call. Like it's that
Oh, yeah.
annoying. Like let's get started. It's starting soon. Like take your seats. That was kind of what I was thinking. But Derek, welcome to the stream for this week. We're really excited to have you. We'll let everyone roll in. I can see we're getting people join in. But do you wanna tell us a little bit about yourself, your role at Amazon to get started?
Thanks. Oh, thanks for having me, Matt. Yes, I just I had dual audio there. I was like, which one shall I turn off first? Yeah. So my name's Derek. If anybody hasn't come across me before, hi everybody. Hi. I'm a developer advocate at AWS, and so I look after all of the developers, advocate on their behalf across Australia and New Zealand, which is a very cool job. And as part of that job, I also get to look after and help everybody who wants to stream on Twitch. So I'm very excited to be on this show in particular.
And we're very
Since
happy.
you're an expert streamer, right, Derek?
You're
Definitely not going to talk over other people. We're going to have it really smooth today. It's going to work
What do you mean
perfectly.
talking over people?
No.
Excellent. Yeah, so really excited to have you. We wouldn't have the show without you and supporting us internally at AWS as well. So we're really grateful for that. I can see that we've actually had in the comments a couple of people that know Duke Nukem, so the
That's
Megadeth
what I'm talking
Duke
about.
theme. Yep, that was on my Winamp like music player like way back in the day. So I'm showing my age.
It really kicks the llama's ass.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
I don't know if we can
classic.
say that on air though, Aaron. But yep,
Ass. It's a donkey.
donkey. Yes, exactly.
Bottom. The lamb is bottom.
The llama's donkey.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyways, Derek's on the stream this week. We are looking at development trends. So we're going to go through some of the things that we've been seeing emerge. We might talk a little bit about Web3. We might talk a bit about WebAssembly. We might talk about Rust, TypeScript. Everyone in the chat can kind of lead the conversation as well. So if you've got something that you've seen that's new that you're quite excited about, like we can have a look at it, see if it's a trend that we've seen as well. So it's going to be a bit more of an informal one. We're not going to show any code this week, but it's going to be nice and interactive, and it's all around dev stuff.
We could show some code, Matt.
You
You
mean-
just what are you currently got in your IDE?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I wrote
Interview
all of
notes,
this-
actually, for people that have gone through a couple of interviews recently at AWS. Yep.
I wrote all of this
I
rough
actually do
for
all my
today for no
interview
reason.
notes in there. Yeah. I do all my interview notes in VS Code as well, and so yeah, I mean it's like a highly utilized tool.
Yeah, it's great, and it's just like it's nicer to have like just a blank canvas that works well with night mode. I don't like looking at white sheets, and it's Markdown based as well, right? So I can kind of format it quite nicely as well with VS Code and a couple of add-ons.
Yep.
What don't you like about Notepad?
Notepads.
The name Notepad.
Notepads. I don't think I've got Notepad on this PC. I've got.
Oh, well, Vim in Linux then.
I'm not using Linux either. I've got Apple Notes, to be honest, on this machine. But I'm a sucker for dark mode, right? So I don't think Apple Notes supports dark mode yet. So that's why it's VS Code. Just jumping in, getting everything kick-started as well. For those that haven't joined the stream before, Devs in the Shed is all about getting hands-on with tools. Generally, we are in the shed. Aaron is in his shed today. I'm in my cabin, as you can see in the background. Paul is fixing a couple of things at his house, so he's inside today. And Derek, it doesn't look like a shed, but it's a pretty cool setup you've got there.
This is my shed, Matt. This is where I build my things. This is where I come to heal my hurts.
Nice. And what kind of things do you generally build as a dev advocate? Like, what are you playing with at the moment? What's exciting you in terms of the
Yeah.
new shiny shine?
Well, that's probably a good lead into the first topic that I wanted to talk about, but forgot to tell you. So at the minute, I'm building a demo. Well, build a demo using AWS Amplify and Amplify Studio, which is a new no-code, low-code service that we brought out last year. So I built a demo around the talk I'm giving for that, which is going to debut at ANZ Summit, which is in May, I believe. So that's what I've currently been playing around with, and it's pretty cool. I'm historically, we're developers. We're in a good place here. We can talk with each other. Historically, I'm not really a big fan of no code, low code solutions because, well, they break. But I think playing around with Amplify Studio, it gives you enough levers and enough customization points that I'm quite hopeful that it may not break as you change it and work through the application lifecycle with it. So that's what I've been doing at the minute.
That's cool. I know, Aaron, you've played a lot with Amplify Studio as well. What's your thoughts so far on it?
I actually agree with Derek. I'm not a big fan of low-code, no-code situations, just because being a coder myself, I like to be in control. But the thing that I like about Amplify is the level of being able to step in or step out. So you can go all the way through to Studio, use UI, build out components without having to code, and then import them. Or you can just go straight in, use the CLI to set up resources, use the SDKs for actually programming your own components, or you can then go and use the actual component libraries as well. So, there's a middle ground, there's a almost no code, low code, and there's a very coded through Amplify flavor, I guess you could call it.
Yeah. What about honeycode as well, right? Like, I'll let you go in a second, Paul, but like, I do think low code, no code's really good from a, like, there are so many people within businesses that are building spreadsheets, managers, teams that want to do something. They want some automation, calculation of data, like all that stuff. Like, I do think no code, it's really valuable because that means that we don't need to build an app for everything within a business. When we work in a company, we can focus on, the big moving parts, like the core platforms that business relies on. So I kind of see honeycode in that space. And then, Amplify, you can use end-to-end with an enterprise and production. It's grown a lot over the last 5 years. But, we've always had this start fast mentality with it. And I feel like the Figma to building out data sources and all that with Amplify Studio gets you started. And then when you start to need to do customizations, you can bring in all the advanced things like build off Lambdas, bring in other AWS services and stuff. Paul, what were you going to say though?
I was just going to talk about that, the point with Figma. I mean, if you're building, I've spent a lot of time building internal apps, but probably more time building external apps where it's the design team and the look and the feel and the way it works is so important. And it's always just such a pain point going backwards and forwards and, getting a PSD and trying to crop it out and make these components and be able to share them. So I think that's that's a really nice piece for, a team that has somebody that's doing proper design and keep it standardized and be able to build those proper, reusable components rather than just picking one of the standard themes. I mean, I'm sure all of us know, what was it like? Maybe I'm saying my age here now, when Bootstrap became popular, literally every site you saw was Bootstrap. Everything everybody did was always Bootstrap, so you could just tell straight away. And the expectation is much higher now. But also, on your point about honeycode, there is so much more that goes on just the apps that we see on the internet or online or on our phones. There is this huge ratio of internal apps that are hidden away. That people in the public will never see, and they're used and they translate, transmitting a lot of money, really important to the business, and a small select group will see that, and there's big project teams working on these applications. Then further to that, because I've spent time working at big insurance companies or banks, you do see those back office, what do you call them, like squirrel projects, where people have built something in Access or Excel, something to help make their life better and faster and easier without having like full support of the development team. So, there's a huge place for low code and no code solutions. And it's not just developers every day that are building things on technology or taking advantage of automation. Like there are business people that are building this that don't necessarily know how to code, and they need these solutions.
Yeah, I think that comes back to what Bad Hombre said here, right? Like, is there valid use cases? And it's like, it's not going to be their core app built with Honeycode, right? It's not going to like at this point in time, and I would love to be corrected on that. But it's all the tiny little things that you don't realize are there in a company that you start to realize as you dig deep. It's there's analysts, there's managers, there's like HR. There's everyone's trying to build something in Excel, and they're kind of like a little bit of a developer, but codifying it in a platform is probably better than maintaining in numerous Excel documents, right?
I think Paul definitely hit the nail on the head, where it's the valid use cases that I've seen in the systems integration space is the business process augmentation. So it's like when you've got a big business process, you've got the different departments all gathering data, crunching data, whatever they're doing with their data, and then they need to share it around. When those little groups, of non-developers get in and say, we can automate this small portion of what we're doing, or we can collect it all together and send it off to somebody else, that's when the no-code solutions really come into their own, because it's that quick, getting away from Excel, getting away from having things stored in files, and now being able to share the data and have workflow approvals and everything through your app without having to do any code.
Yeah. I think also, and again, Bad Hombre should be in this on this channel live, because that's exactly what he says. Where software developers are the worst customers for low code, because all the low code solutions that we look at it from a software development lens, not a business analyst lens, where we go, oh, this is just generating spaghetti code, untestable. We can't do any regression on it. We're just really just shipping it out the door and hoping for the best. I think that that keeps software developers, certainly keeps me awake at night, and that's why we've shied away from these solutions.
It also keeps us employed in a sense, right? So I don't view it as an enemy. I view it as
rewrite.
Once it gets to a certain stage in its growth, it's like, okay, let's bring in developers. This is becoming key to our business. Let's build this out properly. Let's think of all the logic, flows that we need. Yeah.
And don't forget how many people have got a shared Excel document with macros on a shared drive or a shared location, and 6 people trying to work on that at the same time. Like, it works well when you're 1 or 2 people. I mean, maybe it works well with 2 people, but as businesses start to grow and improve, like those things start breaking down, and that's where something like Honeycode is like the perfect next step in that chain.
Yep, but I would say that's where businesses have been trying to improve, in terms of, exactly to your point, Derek, like as a software engineer, I want to be writing the software. I don't want to be depending on somebody else who wrote it, but there's always going to need to be somebody who writes that automation software. And that's where, what's it called? The robotic automation processes and the businesses have been trying to automate their processes for years. And so there's always going to be a need for the engineer to write the automation, but then it's just reducing the need for the engineer so that the business can actually scale without the need for, highly skilled coders or, whatever it is that they need to spend money on.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to a couple of different topics as well. Let's focus on the tools and things that we're excited about as developers. And no-code definitely has its place there, but I keep thinking of what's happening in JavaScript land myself, right? I'm a little bit biased because I do quite a bit on the front ends, a little bit biased, but TypeScript's really evolved. I'm actually slow to the uptake of TypeScript, to be honest. But I'm probably going to get pressure on me to get in line and move to using TypeScript instead of JavaScript, because I use a lot of AWS's CDK, which is TypeScript native. and I can safely say that I was on the losing side of the battle when it comes to types. So that's kind of something that I'm going to be exploring over the coming months. But I also want to dive into Svelte, and I know React and React Native has got some major architectural changes. So I wanted to kind of get your thoughts and opinions on kind of like what's happening in this JavaScript space as a group.
Yeah, change.
Yeah.
If you,
I don't like it. I don't like it.
if you've had the joy of working in the JavaScript space for the last 10 years, change is a thing. This is just more change. Enjoy. Strap yourselves in. I've been using TypeScript for a while, and it is a bit of a shift. If you have traditionally used JavaScript, types are not a thing. Everything var is a thing. So making that transition, it can be a bit tricky. But if you've lived in a strongly typed language like C# or Java, it makes complete sense. So that was my background when I moved into TypeScript. So it made complete sense, luckily enough. But yeah, in terms of where is like React and React Native, where are they going? They're just getting better, more efficient, and moving closer and closer to, in my opinion, what C#, Java have been for some time.
One thing, and this is kind of why I was always in and I'll probably get myself into trouble, but I came from I came from an Objective-C, C++ type background, and like one of the things that I really liked about Python and JavaScript was a little more of the freedom as a language for you to kind of get something built quickly, and less ceremony, like dealing with types, and less of like a whole bunch of different things that kind of like comes with a dynamically typed language. And so to me, like, I've always viewed them as quite separate. So we came from similar backgrounds, but for me, it was really just the freedom. And then it's like now we're actually kind of meeting halfway in the middle, and it's like TypeScript's almost becoming like C# and other languages that are statically typed. Aaron and Paul, I know you guys have both got...
I probably agree with you a bit more, Matt. Like, I come from strongly typed languages, so C++, C#, Java, and then I guess it's a paradigm shift, right? So the reason I used the JavaScript was for its dynamic approach, because I would be using something like C# generics, which is your dynamic, you don't need to strongly type it. So I'm integrating my applications with C# generics, so I go to JavaScript for that capability. So then, bringing on TypeScript and working a lot with React and React TypeScript and CDK with TypeScript, it makes sense being strongly typed, but it just changes my way of approaching why I would use it, or why I would use JavaScript versus TypeScript.
Nice. What about you, Paul? You've been relatively quiet on the subject.
Look, again, like my first languages were, C++, and then I spent a bunch of time in using Cold Fusion. I don't know if anybody in the audience has ever used Cold Fusion. And again, like that's another typeless language, dynamically typed language.
So Code Fusion, that's you've talked about it before, but could you give us a little bit? Cold Fusion, yeah.
So Cold Fusion is like an abstraction that sits on top of Java, and basically you code in a specific language, and like at runtime it compiles that back into Java bytecode, and it just executes on top of the JVM. But it abstracts away typing and so forth, and puts a lot of like easy abstractions on top of like leveraging Java. It's largely not used anymore. I haven't used it in in a commercial sense for I don't know, over 10 years at least. And then I spent a lot of time doing like C#, and then I was using like Adobe Flex, another action script. And so I think it's like kind of natural to like think about new typed languages. But I guess it's more like the industry as a whole is looking for more professionalism about what you're doing. So it's like getting stuff out the door. It's great. And like, forgetting about unit tests and all sort of stuff, like, everything that you're going to do, and like this comes with TypeScript, is like you want to shift catching the error like further away from the users. So once you start like implementing something like TypeScript, you can catch some of those like runtime errors, ahead of time, where you're not going to run into some of those issues. You're putting in place the ability to make your code testable and a little more reliable. And any time you think about like improving the quality of your code or your application, that comes at a cost, and I guess that's the trade-off. And as we're probably seeing like our industry mature, I've been like working in the developer space for like 20 years. I've seen it change dramatically. Like the expectation from the end user 20 years ago was like, I don't know, I guess you can click the button. Like if it doesn't work, like, some angry IT guy might fix it for you in a week, to now being like, it's the expectation that it works and it feels like really, really slick. Like the expectation is so much higher. So it's like, it's an industry change across. But I also see, like, I know Bad Hombre commented it, and Derek like said it as well. I have seen people say, I want to take TypeScript, I want to use TypeScript, convert my application to TypeScript, without having really understood some of the fundamentals, or I do computer science, like, and I'm not like advocating that you need to do like any sort of specialized degree or anything like that, but understanding why you're supposed to be using TypeScript versus someone coming in and say, I'm going to use TypeScript, but anywhere where it's too hard for me to type, I'm just going to use any. Like that's kind of the wrong approach. It's like that's like resume development.
Yep.
Get out a jail free card. Yeah, let's use the get out a jail free card. Yay! That's that story done. Next.
So I 100% agree with you, Paul. Like that's exactly what I'm saying around the paradigm of where you would use TypeScript versus JavaScript. Because if you're using TypeScript, use the types, like use the actual purpose of the language. If you're using JavaScript, it's for a different purpose. Same as when I'm doing C# with generics. Obviously I'm going to build out interfaces, I'm going to build out classes and the like. But when I'm using generics, or like an observer pattern where I can feed anything into it, it doesn't have to be, inheriting the interface. I just want to hand in anything. That's fine. But then if I'm not doing that, it's all strongly typed.
Yep. That's the exception. So that's those patterns that you don't not to be used every day. You have to know, especially observer, otherwise spaghetti. But yeah, there's exceptions, not the rule. But yeah, great points. I love the show. This is great. Thanks for inviting me. This is the best conversation I've had in weeks.
The only conversation you've had in weeks.
The best, definitely the best.
VSK got a really good question, and they ask, what do you think is the future prospects of CDK? Do you think it will have demand in the future, or is it something like Terraform take over?
So I might have a go at this one.
Yeah.
Terraform, is pretty cool. I'm an advocate for it, but I've kind of gone into the CDK camp. I mean, one of the things that Terraform does that I kind of don't trust, but it's not a real trust issue. It's just like the way that I kind of have an opinionated thought on it, is kind of like maintain its own state, and it's kind of like its own flavor to the world. Whereas the way that I kind of see like CDK approaching things is quite different, right? Like it integrates with the languages that you choose. You can write in one language like TypeScript and basically share the package or modules that you've written in that with something else that might be built in Python for CDK. And so for me, it feels more natural as a developer, and I trust that the state's basically maintained by CloudFormation. So I know when I'm going to make resources, like exactly where they're going to be and what state they're going to be in, and I can roll back fairly easily from that state. And I feel like I've got a level of control that I want. I think CDK is actually the future. And I think a lot of the Terraform people see that as well, because Terraform themselves are actually quite excited about CDK, and they've got Terraform CDK packages that they have. I think they're still in beta. I'd have to check, but I think they really like that like language based approach where it's like you as a developer you can make your code testable. You can write in the language that you like to use or you need to use for a project. But I'll let everyone else speak here as well, because I know a lot of people
definitely
here
got
love
strong
CDK.
opinions.
Yeah, yep.
There's a few strong opinions here.
Yeah. If you look at it's the natural progression. Like if you look at the history of automation, so CI/CD process, all the way from why we do infrastructure as code. Like if you go all the way back to the days of running on-prem, where we were using like Microsoft Systems Manager to manage our virtual environments, we were writing scripts, right? So bash scripts to execute changes on our virtual environments. Then like we went from that to saying, hey, we don't need to write these scripts. We can create declaration, and we can actually have our parameters in these declaration files to execute our scripts. Well, that's kind of where CloudFormation templates, that's where Terraform, that's where it's at. That's the declarative way of doing things. But we're abstracting away again. It's the natural progression. And CDK is not the only language-based way of doing things. There's like Plurally, there's other ways of doing it as well. But it's adding that to what Matt was saying, that language capability on top of your declaration. You're no longer having to do these massive, big declarative files. It's now logical. You can say, I want this function to link to this function. Those two functions are actually services that then get synthesized out to the declaration, but all that's done for you. Whereas I might spend half an hour writing a CDK app with a couple of different stacks, whereas to do the equivalent in CloudFormation templates or Terraform, I might spend a week. Like going through it all, making sure the policies are the same, whereas all of the under the hood security and policies and all the heavy lifting that we write is done for you in the actual CDK libraries. So I agree, it's the future.
Yeah, I work with customers that use a bunch of different tooling, and I think like one of the great things about being a solutions architect at AWS is like you end up working with your customers and forming an extension of their team, and so you work with them. Like we are not here to pressure or push our customers into using one technology or another. So and that's really good, because like my customers will come and say, I'm having trouble with this thing in Terraform in my environment, and I'll be like, all right, let's like work through it and see what it is. It's not like the first thing I do is not say, you should use CDK, that'll be better for that, or you should just use straight CloudFormation, that'll be better for that. But what I am seeing is that some of my customers are saying, we're really liking CDK. We're doing like proof of concepts for that. We're looking at taking what we've got in either like Terraform or any other mechanism and saying, we're looking towards CDK. We're seeing the advances and the changes, especially with the release of like CDK v2. It's made all of that a lot easier. So CDK v1 had some of its challenges with the way it managed dependencies, and you could get yourself in a jam. Like, so, people would be like, it's kind of frustrating. Like, I install this new extra package now, it won't redeploy, and I have to do all this refactor work. CDK v2 like took a lot of that away. And even just this afternoon, so at 3:00 this afternoon, I got a session with the CTO of like, a large company that is wanting to say like, what is CDK? What is the future of it? And how can it apply to our environment where we are typically used to writing something that's declarative or, a bunch of PowerShell scripts that are stitched together? And the answer is like, people or engineers want to write code. You're writing code, and if you're building infrastructure as actual code, 5 years ago, we said infrastructure as code, but we weren't. Our infrastructure as code was actually like templated CloudFormation. And it was, as something that we could reproduce over and over, and took the concept of like how we apply code. But nowadays with CDK, it is actual code, like it is real code in real languages.
Absolutely. 100% agree with everybody's take here. I just really reiterate the things that I think are important. Evolution of infrastructure as code. We went from JSON to YAML to proper code. So it's now proper code. So I think it traces the evolution of where cloud's going. Cloud started off as infrastructure people interested in running their machines in someone else's data center. Now it's progressing into developers wanting to run their applications somewhere where they won't go down. So that's how we're evolving infrastructure as code into actual testable, typed code where a developer can come write the tests, and be very confident in the code that they're writing. It will work. In terms of what technologies to use. I must confess, I have never used Terraform because, frankly, anything that says JSON or YAML scares me. But I have used CDK and Pulumi, and I put a link to Pulumi there. Both of those make sense because when you read the documentation as a developer, you know exactly how to reuse a particular construct in CDK terms, how to pass parameters down, how to structure your project so it's not a load of spaghetti and other developers can understand it. So that's why I think, and I hope that the adoption of tools like CDK and Pulumi will continue. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, just changing gear, I think. Maybe something that we can talk a little bit about, because we've talked about it on a couple of episodes ago, Aaron. But micro front ends, right? Continuing the trend of microservices. I think micro front ends is going to be something that we're going to see more and more of an investment of, because front end apps have grown. They've gotten a lot more serious than just templated HTML and then just a simple API back into the back end. A lot of them maintain state themselves. And then we've got large teams that work across, multiple code bases for mini apps that they've embedded within a website. Do you want to give your take on where you see this trend going? I know the browser support's only just really started to get to where it needs to be to kind of support this model too, so it's very fresh.
You want me, or are you asking Derek?
I'm going to ask you, actually. I know Derek's thought about it as well, so
I'll go next.
Response. Yeah,
I'll go next. I'll just argue with everything that Aaron says. Go.
Awesome.
Perfect.
So from my point of view is more coming from systems integrators' point of view. So it's not really a web developer first perspective, and that is I see micro front ends in the systems integration space becoming a lot more popular just for those things that you mentioned in terms of the ability to treat front ends the same way that we've been treating back ends for a long time now with microservices, with DevOps. So breaking into multiple teams to take responsibility for multiple domains that all make up one larger application. So microservices in the back end, back ends for front ends, now microservices or micro front ends. But then I also see with the stuff that we've discussed around so runtime sharing of remote resources and calling things in at runtime, as opposed to your bundling and having to bundle everything in with your dependency issues for different versions and all that. With Webpack 5, with the federated module plugin, a lot of these issues go away. So it's actually becoming a lot easier for developers to get in and start developing their separated front ends or separated UIs, and then having that singular, I call it a monolith container, but having that singular container that binds them all together. It's kind of bringing back the days of iframes. Like we used to use iframes to show things from different servers before, but it's now giving us a lot more ability to interact between the components. It's a lot more secure than using iframes. There's no fear of a man in the middle attack. We can secure the cross domain if it's a cross domain, or we can have multiple front end UIs all running off the same domain in sort of separate subdomains or separate folders, or there's different patterns to enable different ways of doing it, but it's a lot more fluid and it's a lot easier, or a lot less barrier to entry to do it at runtime now, which actually makes it easier. So I'll let you argue with me on that, Derek.
No, I don't disagree 100%, Aaron. I think the conversations that I have with people around micro front end. So in my role, I have a lot of developers reach out with, I've heard of this, I've heard of that. What have you heard of it? So micro front ends, I always have two conversations. One from people who want to build a micro front end app in a web technology, and ones who want to try it in a native technology. To the native technology people, I go, scary. There be dragons there because of how you build that monolithic container app and make it work and pluggable with the other domain apps inside it. However, as you were discussing, the changes and the additions to the web tech to enable you to pull in at runtime those domain apps, is great. And when I talk to people, I give them this link. I sent them this link, which Matt actually sent me, which is a fantastic blog series by a customer in Australia, NAB Bank. And in this link, it's well worth what if you're watching. The links on Twitch, as you put it on YouTube as well. It's just worth a read, because what it does, it explains how NAB went about building their micro front end pattern, and as Aaron also alluded to, how you interact with the back end is everything from these domains in the front end. And what they used was a BFF, or backends for front end pattern, and GraphQL, which was genius. I thought that was a great idea and a great use case for GraphQL, because it enables you to reach into different domains and pull out information and send it back to the client. So it's a really, really great article to look at. Where micro front ends are going, the best use case I've seen so far is a government agency. Okay, so a government agency wants to build an application, but they have to use the other agencies for the data, for the information, and they don't have a big development team. So to them, building the container app should be their concern. They then put in the contract that all the other agencies who want to surface information through this application, they have to adhere to, and so they can then deliver their content through the container app. So it gives everybody a good outcome. The complexities is defining that contract of that container app and getting everybody to adhere to it. Because what will usually happen, as we all know, is other teams will get frustrated if the team who's controlling the container app, who also probably controls the building deployment pipeline, is not being as open and as reactive to their to building those boundaries as they should be. So that's a good use case that I've seen for micro front ends. And I'll stop there, because I could start talking about this for quite some time, and let somebody else talk.
You're on mute, Paul.
Sorry, I'm expecting the plumber coming to fix a leak in the kitchen when I don't have to drop off. So I did mute myself then. But I think one of the things that is different, like microservices and breaking up the monolith, means you've got like these definitive, or you try to have definitive domain boundaries that separate things off. So I don't know, let's just say for argument's sake, you've got like customer data and payment data. Like those might be two, the boundaries are pretty clear and pretty separate there. Micro front ends is less about specifically defining or breaking down those domains to where they are, but providing you with the ability to effectively just deploy independently and break reliance on some other part of the front end. And I think it's it's becoming popular and buzzy now, whereas I guess a few years ago, people were doing this, and I was doing this, but I didn't know that I was doing microfriends. I didn't really think about what I was doing, but I worked on a really large application that it was basically all Backbone JS and rendered out with PHP using Laravel. And we were doing a transitional piece to take this really large application that was transacting. It was billions of dollars of transactions that were going through this system. And you say, how do we take such a large user base, such a predefined application, and piece by piece switch that off into some other piece of technology as we need to modernize? And we needed to keep it up to date. We needed to follow what the developer trends are. It becomes hard to hire developers in that area. So how do you do that bit by bit? And it's you need to pick some of these pieces off. So, micro front ends isn't something you say, hey, I'm just going to start tomorrow and all of a sudden build 50 different modules and all the different teams, complicated pipelines that are hooking into each other. There's a time and a place where it makes sense. And one of those good places is when you've got something that is going to, or the shell is going to stay there for a while, you're transitioning away from that. You can pick off bits and pieces, have teams starting to work in the new technology and migrate them across. The other one is where you've got an application where I think Brad says it again, where Brad, not Brad said it. If you've got an application team that's big enough to be able to support that, then it also makes really, really good sense as well. I've worked in teams where there's been 15 developers, some teams where there's been 5 developers, but I've worked at other organizations where there's literally hundreds and hundreds or thousands of developers working on one thing that people look at and view as like one single website, where there's absolutely massive teams and they are really tailored and focused to their small little area. So it can make a lot of sense in those areas.
Yeah, and I think of the complexity of rides. Like I know there's a travel service for like car rides that have a really good engineering blog sometimes. People can probably guess who it is. But, there's multiple customer profile types. There's multiple things that can be picked up, from food to actual people. There's different vehicle types. There's different types of journeys. And, the one journey for you is just one out of the 1,000 variations of that screen that they can have. And so when I think of that scale as well, that's where I really see it fit. I really like it from the perspective of like someone wants to experiment with Svelte or Vue, right? Somebody else has got an Angular part of the website that needs to be maintained. And then, you're building something in React, but you want to use all the new React features. It's like having a micro front end, built in React, for example, means that you can have all these other types of frameworks come together, right?
I'll just jump on that one. I think that's probably the benefit there, right? If you've got different teams working across different stacks, and it makes sense because micro front ends really blends well with backends for front ends. And then if you've got one team in Angular, one team in React, cool, great. They don't have to use the same stack. They can pull them together in their container. But I think there is a real danger, and I think it was either Derek or Paul sort of just lightly touched on this, is that the difference between like a micro front end and a component driven application. Like if you're breaking your application into components, that may be all you need. So like something like React, where you've got multiple React components, that makes sense. But if you're then breaking each of those components into a back end for front end, so a micro front end, component for your application, maybe now you're going way too far down the track and it's overkill, because, you might be running, one team with one source in a mono repo for multiple front ends. It doesn't make sense. So there's the boundary between what makes sense for a component and what makes sense for a separated UI. And I think that was what you were saying there, Matt, is around the difference in libraries, the difference in stacks, and the difference in whether there's a need for a separated backend.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of like moving forward on the topic of micro front ends, it always brings me to, is WebAssembly going to kick off sometime soon, right? So this is my segue, right? Because
what year is it?
I've been waiting for WebAssembly for quite some time, right? Like, and I know, and I know, like, there's Python, WASM, WebAssembly. There's like Rust. Rust is a fantastic language that we're seeing huge amounts of adoption in AWS that we could talk about for a little bit. But we've got customers that kind of want to use the language that they're comfortable with, and they want to use that for web. And so that's kind of where I see WebAssembly being handy, but I haven't really seen it tick off yet. So it's still in my wait and see camp. I don't know if any of you guys have had experience WebAssembly, played around with a little bit, but I feel like it's still in the oven, and I'm kind of watching very closely as to what happens there over the next year or two.
No,
that's been the last 5 years.
I think I first played with WebAssembly way back when I had hair. I tore it out and never went back. Just really, it just scares me. I love it. I love the concept, and I love it to happen.
Yep.
Hard, really hard.
What about alternatives, right? Like,
yeah.
Flutter for web.
Yeah.
Right? Like rendering everything onto a canvas to make things possible. Like that's an interesting.
Does it slightly remind you of like Flash, right? I mean, that was the idea of like Flash, and I did. I did I spent a lot of time in Adobe Flex, and you would build something and it just looked the same absolutely everywhere, no matter what browser, because you had that runtime over the top of it. And obviously, that's like gone out of the window, and that's why you have these things like Yeah, right. We have this idea. So rendering something onto a canvas, and you have like a very well abstracted mechanism to do that. It seems like it could be like, starting to head in the right way.
But it's
And I
like
think browsers
I
have
would,
also closed a lot of the gap as well. With
yeah,
things
I would
run
just
mostly the same in most browsers.
I would call out HTML5 canvas and then basically interacting on the canvas because I agree with you. I 100% agree. I played with Flex. I played with React, ActionScript 1 and 2. Like back in the day. But I feel like in terms of that, what the Flash and Shockwave and all that offered in terms of the scalable, it always looks the same across every browser. That's where like WebGL components come from. That's where Canvas interacting directly with Canvas. So JavaScript libraries, I know Matt, a few for games, that you can build out full WebGL games on the web.
yeah, like
I think
Phaser,
that's yeah, exactly. That's where they come into their own because now they're interacting with the canvas. Now they're developing those, or you can develop those components that look the same across sort of whatever browser you're using.
There's also Ember for Flutter as well. The one thing is, I think similar to what Paul said beforehand, I always think battery life, and I'm like so like we've got this merge of the markets, right? Like we wanna develop something that's going to scale across like both native apps on a user's device and the web and desktop apps, and that's the nirvana that like we've been aiming for since like Adobe Phone Gap way back in the day, and probably even before that again, right? I feel like Flutter is fantastic for mobile application development, but I still worry a little bit about the cost, considering 50% of the user base is going to be looking at these websites on mobile. You're going to have battery drain. You could also have performance difficulties as well, like if the battery's worn out or the phone's underpowered as well. And so, even if you've got a simplistic site, if you've got like a fancy animation, it can actually ruin the user experience on that site too. So,
Because that's something to like really consider, like the performance of front end applications. Like I have, a nice M1 MacBook that runs anything like really well, whether it's in the browser or not. But I also have a 2015 13-inch MacBook Pro, and if I use like certain social media sites that are built in React and use a lot of JavaScript, it's like it's kind of painful. Like it's really painful. Now, all right, that device is getting on 6.5 years, but I'm just comparing those two devices, and especially if you think about like mobile, that yeah, of course you might be sitting on a brand new Samsung or a brand new iPhone, but there are a lot of like devices in the middle that people are trying to use to access these services and these applications that they're just underpowered devices. Like it doesn't work right. Like devices are out there in the market, and mid-range and low-range devices, because people are still buying those, actively buying those.
Yeah, and it takes us back to the intro sequence to this fabulous show. I was reading an article about people buying devices more and more that actually are not smart, so dumb devices, because they just want to have a different lifestyle choice than using the traditional mobile phone. Now, will this gather speed? How do we build something for those sort of really, as you say, Paul, low powered devices that add the value, but are consistent experience for the users? Because I think people expect certain common denominators from their phone, apart from just ringing now. But by the same token, there's just too much choice on a modern mobile phone. So yeah, I think that feature is quite an interesting.
but Flutter itself, like pivoting a little bit, Flutter itself is a pretty cool language for developing mobile apps, right? And it does definitely bridge the gap between Android and iOS, similar to what Kotlin tries to do as well. And I think that it's really like data as a language is quite easy to learn, but it's also quite complex as well. So this is something that I do want to experiment more, and I've built a couple of apps in Flutter, and I found the experience to be quite fast and fun to do. And as a developer, that's kind of what I look for these days. And that was my comment back on TypeScript. It's like, I know that types are fantastic. I know that there's a huge benefit to having them, and I know I know that, like the ultimate nirvana for a well-built app would be something that's, statically generated, maybe is how I'd word it. But at the same time, like I like to have fun. I like freedom. I like to see something being, developed fast in my spare time when it's a personal project. And that's kind of like why I go on the Python and the JavaScript camp when I just want to build something for myself.
I think I was also with Flutter. I had a user group last night, and there was two camps around Flutter. The younger generation, like myself, love Flutter because you get stuff done quickly, and it looks pretty slick for not much code. Where the other side of the coin was, well, what's it doing to the phone, battery life, etc., etc. If we just pull that full circle to where we started with low code, no code, why can't we have a great developer experience like Flutter and then transform that application into any platform so it will run on any platform? Why are we wasting our time with low code, no code when we should be optimizing a built application in a great developer experience into any platform? I think that to me is the nirvana of application development.
And the ultimate
And
nirvana
surely,
on
like,
that is Linux. Like I would love to see, like, like Apple and Android, and then it works on Windows, and it goes into Windows Store, and then it like goes into Mac OS, works on Mac OS Store. Like I think that's also how we increase like the marketability of Linux ultimately as well, right? Is it doesn't matter what OS you use, pick up Linux for free, you're still going to get the same experience across the same apps. Like that ultimate space would be cool, right? Because it just gives people the flexibility to deal with the operating system that they find most interesting or fun to use.
and you have to know that like that is what they're trying to do, right? Like that's why you see so much of these like effectively like platform agnostic solutions come out. Like, but it's not an easy solution, right? At the moment, the best solution is still to individually code for each specific device and be highly tailored, highly specific. Abstraction brings in complexity.
I think, yeah, I think also I agree with what you were saying, Derek, around the difference in perspective is some people just want a really easy development experience. And this is where I kind of draw the line between, and I could be wrong and happy to be argued against, developers and engineers. Like the developers are looking at the UI side of things, or even the middle layer, but it's that very easy development experience. Whereas the engineers are looking at how much memory am I using, how much can I compress it down to, how much bandwidth do I need to use? It's very much a lot more mathematical. Like we're trying to figure out can we squeeze this application into a smaller piece of hardware, and the like. Whereas I feel like they're two very different worlds. Like if you can blend the two together, like you said, for the Nirvana, then you're onto something. You'll make millions. But I feel like we're a long way from that because, like with the recent,
I'm a long way from that.
well, like to the point of what you were saying earlier, Matt, like with the introduction of Rust, Rust is taking away a lot of those memory issues that we have in C, C++, Objective C, and it's making it a lot easier for us to fit something a lot bigger into something a lot smaller, but it's still very much, like if you're not used to working in C or C++, Rust is a very steep learning curve. So it doesn't have that nice developer, user eco-friendly feel to it. It's very much old school. We're going to low-level languages and we're going to pull our hair out, trying to figure out how to get something done. But it's the cost benefit is you'll get your thing to fit on a much smaller device.
Yeah. And then royalty, like I love your comment. AWS is a nirvana. I feel touched. We trying to cater for everyone, right? Like that's why we're relatively agnostic, and we build, so many variations of things, so it kind of fits the use case of how you want to build. But kind of going back to Rust. Rust is huge at Amazon now, right? Like a lot of our C++, C#, Java based applications, like a lot of those ones that are core services are actually moving across to Rust, right?
Can I call out this one? Sounds like Aaron. This is from Young Sing. Sounds like Aaron worked in infra before. No, this is the difference between embedded programming. So we're writing firmware for hardware as opposed to writing applications that have a UI and the like.
Yeah, that's right. Drone coordination was one that you were talking about last week
Love
with
it.
me, like projects and that. You've kind of done like a lot of distributed systems type projects as well. So yeah, good pickup. But Rust itself, like maybe let's talk about that for the last 5 minutes, unless there's something that the audience wants us to kind of focus back down on a little bit more. Um, so so I mean, I know numerous teams in AWS that are using Rust, and memory safety is one. Um, but there's a whole bunch of different benefits in terms of performance that comes with Rust, and operating within a modern language that's got like package management well thought out, etc. You've watched a little bit on this, Aaron. I think, like in terms of like teams talking about it within Amazon.
Yep.
Is there much to share there?
So, what can be shared publicly and what can't? So there
It's a
are
fine
service
line.
teams.
Yeah.
There are service teams in Amazon who are changing out the code base from Java to Rust. Obviously, I don't think I can say which teams they are, but there are some great improvements in terms of efficiency around the use of memory, also the use of CPU. So, like reducing CPU cycles for how do I say it? For sharding, for
Yep.
actually working in distributed systems. So for the services that use sharding, like to develop, to develop something that no longer requires as much memory and as much CPU means that you can actually now increase the throughput. So the amount of user base who are using these services can be increased, again, I don't know, tenfold, however much the actual size is. But based on the fact that with that increased usage, they're now decreasing the amount of cycles of CPU, decreasing the amount of allocated memory required for transactions that allows us to then scale out. So as we start to scale the hardware that supports it, we're now getting more bang for buck. Yeah, we're now able to support a lot more usage on the same hardware, so we can now scale the hardware and get a lot more usage again. So I guess that's probably, it's very high level and very around the edges, but yeah, it's being adopted by Amazon in some of the service teams to help solve those memory and CPU issues.
And customers as well, right? Like we've had a lot of conversations with customers recently that seem to want variations of our SDKs and CDK within Rust, etc. So I think this is something that I do want to play with more this year, learn more about, right? Maybe it's something for another episode. I know we're coming right up to time. We've got 2 minutes left. Derek, did you have anything else to add on Rust as well? Have you had much experience or not yet so far?
So I've had a little bit of experience with Rust. We've all written a lot of programming languages in our time. I think my underlying thoughts on the language itself is it's a nice language, but it is like anything, horses for courses. So we want to really help developers build for the application that they're building. So not every developer is building highly distributed high throughput application. Like the scale of AWS is mind-boggling, and so Rust is a good reason why service teams will use it. But it's not the answer to all programming problems. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it. I don't think everybody's going to use it.
Yeah, I was gonna say like that kind of also kind of like wraps up things well as well, right? Like trends come and go. Some of these things will be around for years afterwards. We talked about iframes still around from years ago. It really depends on like what's the best outcome for your business in terms of like what needs to be built. Like if you've got a large app that's working really well and it's stood the test of time for 20 years. It has its corners that you wish you could pretty up. It's fine. If that's scaling well for you, you might not need to move it to a microservice. You might not even look at micro-frontends on top of microservices. And so everything's really a fit for what makes the most sense to build and is going to get you to the end outcome that you want. So I always kind of re-emphasize that. But go ahead, Aaron.
Just throw a different angle on that. Like I 100% agree with you, and it should always be pick the right tool for the task, and that's why we live in our sheds. But like from a business point of view, it's not always the most cost effective to pull in a Java programmer when you've got a base of Python programmers. Like I'm a big let's say with the opposite of an advocate for Python in the web. Yeah, like I don't think that web development with Python is the right tool for the task. And I know that I can have arguments all night with people on this, but when there's so many Python programmers out there in the market, then it becomes a lot more cost effective for a business to go, you know what, it's cheaper for us to go and get a whole team of these people instead of one Java programmer who can do the same thing, but it's going to take twice as long because it's one person. So sometimes it's the cost factor and the business factor around what's available in the market. It's not always what's the perfect fit in terms of tool for task.
And also on that, it's just like if there's an industry trend towards a specific technology, well, sometimes that technology might not necessarily be the best thing, but it's what's available, right? Sometimes you just got to accept that that's just what I've got to take today.
And I hear you saying I just need to accept Python as web development. Point taken.
So it's I think it was like somebody said it's 75 times less efficient. Or Telemaire says I seem to recall an article that's Python requires 75 times more energy compared to C for the same functionality. Imagine the impact on the planet, and that seems like pretty reasonable. Like that number could be, it seems quite reasonable that you'd expect something like that to happen. But then Tox says that, the inverse of that is, but it could take 100 times of the energy of the devs to write their cloud service in C. Right? I've written lambdas in C++,
absolutely,
and it was hard. It took me like a lot longer. It took me hours to figure out how to compile and build the pipelines compared to something I was going to write into Python. So it's always this trade-off on what you're trying to do and where it makes sense to do that.
Yeah, build fast and rewrite never or later, or build properly from the get-go and have something that's really performant, but it takes you 10 times the amount of time.
Find a good transpiler.
Never say never. You can never predict the future. I've seen so many applications built and over-engineered, and then ended up being rewritten because of the lack of extensibility, because the over-engineering never took into account that this application will ever be extended.
All the business needs changed halfway through development, right? And then it's like what you're building isn't up to scratch, but you're too far down the camp and you need to keep going.
Yeah. Or the business go, let's white label this. This is a great application. Let's white label it. And the devs go,
can we just make that multi-tenant in a day? Is that okay?
Just check an API on it. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Back in front end.
APIs.
Everything.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I think we've had a good conversation. Let's see, Bad Hombres. Let's see what you're saying here.
Never happens, Bad Hombre.
Changes. Which businesses change their needs in the middle of building an app?
Wait, what? Change their needs in the middle of building an app? That never happens.
No, that never happens.
Exactly what we're building, and we never change.
Yeah.
You want a scope creep? What?
Yeah, well, I think that's why we're working with Agile, like a lot of the times, right? Like that's why Waterfall didn't work for a while, and now we're doing Waterfall Agile or Agile or
Fragile.
And even then, there's problems. Yep. Cool.
Because there's people involved, man. There's always going to be problems.
Yeah, that's true. And like the one other thing that I was going to say, I was going to wrap it up, but we didn't really get to talk about Web3, but similar to that energy. That it takes to
a reason to have Derek back.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's do it.
Like that's a conversation for another time, right? Because we could go deep into that, and it's a fun territory, but there's also a lot of controversy and considerations around it, and some people's Web3 is the metaverse, other people's Web3 is AR, VR, and other people's Web3 is it's blockchain.
You don't say the B word.
which is fine, but I don't want to hang on blockchain, but I've got crypto. I've looked at Selenium, but I'm just going to be really interested watching like what happens to the web and applications the next couple of years, because I'm still not convinced on that side that's kind of where we need to pivot to. I still feel there's an inherent end user experience type stuff that needs to be focused on, and there's complexity managing across devices, having consistent experience. And I think on Web3, the privacy aspect's great. Like, that's really good, and giving power to the people, but a lot of it's still a little bit centralized from what I see in the way that things are managed and transacted upon. But let's wrap it up for now, unless anyone else has got any comments. Let you guys jump in. No? Okay, cool. Well, Derek, it's been fantastic having you on the show. I think we were all worried that we are going to speak over each other. I think it worked out pretty well today, and hopefully it was informative and we didn't jump around too much. But let's watch the development trends of the space, and hopefully have Derek back and see where things land, maybe towards the end of the year. What's the trends for 2023, and did what we talk about even go anywhere in 2022?
Yeah, happy to come back, Matt, anytime, and chat with you lovely people. One day it might be in person. How exciting would that be?
That would be awesome.
Cool. Yep. Just a call out to Talamir. How often do you host these talks? We are here every Wednesday at 12 Eastern Daylight Australian Daylight Standard Time.
I don't even know what it means, but
Australian
it's
Eastern
AEDT
Daylight Time. Yeah.
Yep.
So 12 p.m. every Wednesday.
Perfect. Well, with that, thanks everyone for watching, and again, thanks Derek for coming on. We'll catch you all same time next week. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thanks. See you, everybody.